going on, guys? Junior's Fishing Company with a little kind of like a minnow walleye jig today. This is a pattern that has really been tied for a really long time. This is how it's going to swim because this is on a jig hook, but you see a lot of those older streamers. Some of, they've got a little bit of, marabou or whatever on the bottom, and then they've got some deer hair, a deer hair tail. So this isn't necessarily a pattern that I came up with. I'm not even going to come close to saying that. But it's a really fun pattern to mess around with different materials to figure out which sits best, which swims best, stuff that's going to absorb a lot of water and things like that. So this is the pattern I'm going to tie up right here. At the end of this video, I'll show a couple different color combinations that I've kind of been messing around with. But this is going to be primarily for walleye. This is about a 2-inch or so jig. I've tied a couple that were a little bit over 2. This is almost right on the money at 2 inches. The hook I'm using is a fulling mill on this one. I've used a couple different hooks, but this is a fulling mill FM 5130 in size 8. But this is a 2x long hook. So it's a really long shank. So the hook actually seems like it looks a lot bigger than the number. I would, almost call this for sure this is a 8, definitely a 6. It all depends on really the shank length. And this is a wide gap too. So a wide gap long shank hook, you might as well. That's the trouble with hooks, is especially if you don't know exactly what you're ordering online. I can't tell you when I started tying how many hooks I ordered, that I would order a 12 jig hook and it was like a 16, or you'd order a 10 and it's a 3x long nymph hook. So it can be a little bit tricky, but this is definitely on the bigger side. I've got a 1/4 inch slotted tungsten bead, just black nickel. I think this is from Spawn Fly Fish. They are really the only people that you can buy really, really big tungsten beads from. The tail of this, and what's going to end up being the top of the front, is just this is Gadwall barred flank in yellow. I've used other like teal and mallard and stuff like that. They're all pretty similar. Again, at the end I'll show you a couple different color combinations. The bottom of this jig is actually, I've gone between marabou and all this. When I put it in, I'll go in a little more detail, but I'm just using, this is just traditional, hairline, half saddle. I'll show you where I got it though when I get to that. So what I'm going to do, I just took these feathers and I just stripped a bunch off, and it really doesn't matter. Some of the feathers, the fibers are a little bit thinner, wispier, some are a little bit more barred, but I really didn't get too picky. I just kind of I stripped off probably a full feather's worth right here, and I'm just going to tie it on. I tried to kind of make these ones all run the same. You can see that there isn't a lot sticking out. They do tend to be curved, and so you can have them all splay out randomly. It's really not going to matter when they get wet. But I'm going to put this in at about maybe a little bit more than a shank length. I kind of want this, again, I'm going for around a 2-inch bait. In my head, if you throw on an 1/8 ounce jig and you just put like a fathead minnow on there or something, I'd suppose a big fathead is probably about 2 inches long. So that's kind of what I'm going for. This is obviously a perch pattern that I'm going to try to do today. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tie that in right on the top. You could tie it the other way too. You can tie this however you want. But I'm going to wrap up over the top of all of this flank just to create a body, because I do want a little bit of a body, a little thicker body here. It's, again, a really long shank, so you have a lot of room, a lot of ground to cover and I didn't want to, you don't want to waste, it's not that thread's expensive, but it'll save you the wraps. I've got 140 denier UTC in black here, and so that helps too. You're not going to want to tie this with 70 denier thread because it's going to take you 45 minutes to tie it. So get some, I mean, you could probably, you could get away with using even 240. So I've got here just some sparkle braid. This is mini in black. I wanted a little bit of flash in this, but I didn't want to add any tinsel or anything like that. So this sparkle braid is kind of a perfect material to do this, and the black especially is not super crazy flashy in itself. There's a couple other colors I've got, the green and then some rainbow colors and stuff like that. The silver's pretty bright, but this black is relatively I wouldn't say dull, but there's definitely not a ton of flash because I didn't want too much flash. So I'm just gonna build up a little bit of a body here, not too much, because that sparkle braid will add some bulk to this. So I'm just gonna go down a couple times and I'm not being super duper careful about touching wraps just because I don't want you to watch me wrap for a half hour. But if you want your body to look super pretty, you slow down a little bit. But really, when I put those feathers on the top, a lot of this is gonna end up getting covered anyway. Not all of it, but that should be good. So I cut off about 6 inches of this sparkle braid, and what I'm gonna be kind of careful with, whenever I'm wrapping materials like this, I always slide my hands while I'm wrapping. Like if I'm wrapping wire or something like that, I'm not gonna do that with this. I'm always gonna just keep a tension on it. My fingers aren't gonna slide, just because this is a braided material, and if you're sliding your fingers down it can kind of fray it a little bit. And so I'm just gonna kind of keep some steady tension on there. You can add UV to this body, some Solarez or Loon or Raid Zap or whatever you want. I'm not gonna do that on this one just because I have done it. Maybe I've got one sitting here I can show you at the end. So I'm just gonna wrap this right up to the top. Got it a little bit short on that one, but we are gonna be okay. It's kind of a bummer though. On this last one, I'll show you at the end, I left in a little strip of that black in there, and I'll show you on the other ones just to add a little more flash, but I do not have enough to do that, so I'll just come right in here and I'll trim that off. So now you just have to determine what you want on the top and what you want on the bottom of this. You have to remember it's going to be sitting like this, and so on the top I'm going to put I keep wanting to say teal. I don't know what a Gadwall is. I've got some duck hunter in-laws that could probably tell the difference, but I cannot. So I'm going to put this on top. I really just want this to run a little bit into my other feathers, so a little bit longer than a shank, and I'll just put that right on top. If you want this bait to be really thick, you could add, this is probably half a feather's worth, so it's probably about half the density of that tail. But again, you could put 3 feathers full. I'm thinking about tying a couple bigger ones of these, so maybe I will end up doubling my materials. Maybe make a 3-inch bait or something like that. I don't want to wrap too much. So now this neck or whatever, I'm going to use that hackle. And what I did was I have been experimenting around with the different materials to use for this. And so what I ended up doing on the bottom of your saddle, you're going to have all of these little itty bitty feathers that are right along kind of the skin of the bird, and they look just like this. It's not really a hackle feather. I mean, it's a hackle feather, but it's more like a marabou than anything. And so what I'll do is I'll just take this and I'll pinch it, and I'll just use that little pinched part. So I think I've probably got 4 or 5 pieces that I cut, and I'm just gonna put those and go about to maybe about there, about the same length as the top, and I'll just kind of trim it up. This is fluffier stuff, and so this is kind of where you add some bulk to your collar, but I'll just put that right there, and I'll wrap that down. And then what I want to make sure is that my wraps on the bottom and the top are even, just because it makes for a nicer looking bait. And I'm going to put eyes on this, really just because. So I'll just finish this off before I add my eyes. And again, this is supposed to be just a little perch pattern jig, plenty heavy with that quarter inch tungsten bead, and I put quite a few 0.015 lead wraps on there too. I'm gonna just split some of these out just to get them on either side of my hook. It's easier to do it when it's wet. So the eyes, the one I showed you at the beginning had 4mm red eyes. I'm going to do 4mm earth color eyes. These are living eyes. Just because those subtle changes sometimes can be all the difference in the world. But these 4mm are very small. The 3mm, it's almost, using those 3mm, I get as much glue on my fingers as I do on the bait. You could put a lighter to this at this point just to really clean it up, but I'm not gonna, just because it ends up, these that light hackle stuff can burn pretty good. So just a small eye, you could go 5-6mm, but I kind of have been leaning on smaller sized eyes as opposed to just really, really big oversized eyes. I don't know why. I think in the past I've used eyes that are probably a little too big, and I just want to make sure that looks pretty good. Make sure they're centered. That's not too bad. And then all I'm going to do now to finish this off, pretty easy tie. It took me probably longer to prep these materials, the feathers, than it did to actually tie them up. I'm just going to put, this is Solarez, what is this one, Thin Hard. I'm just going to put a little bit. I'm not going to build up too much here. Just enough where it can kind of sit, add a little bit of gloss, but just to kind of cover up I'll have to add a little bit more on this just because some of it likes to sneak down into that little slot part. And I'll just cure that up. And then you can, if you want, I've been doing this with my eyes, taking a little bit of like bone dry or something like that. Take a little bone dry and just cover the eye a little bit and put some UV on there. Just adds a little flash. I don't know if really anything besides that, but a lot of this UV stuff, if you fish it a lot, put it back in your box, fish it, it does kind of get foggy, and so you end up adding more anyway if the bait even lasts that long. But simple pattern, super cool. This will really kind of matte down when it's wet. I showed you that one at the beginning. I've got a little orange one here that I tied. This one is about 1.5 inches. And you can see on this one, I had that little piece of sparkle braid that I left in there just for a little bit of extra flash. So that would be an orange one. I tied a couple that were, this is like I think is a 4B whiting hen saddle that I used instead of the teal or the Gadwall. I'll show you a teal one in just a sec. But a lot of different ways to tie this one up. This is a bit of a flashier one with that flashier body and bigger eyes too, but that's a lot smaller. And then you can kind of see how it's going to look when it's wet. I got this one wet just a little bit ago, a couple days ago, and it's definitely going to lay down more. I definitely used less materials on this one. The one I just tied, I put a lot more materials than I had on the previous ones, just because I wanted a couple bigger ones. If those fish are really biting, that's what I usually always do. If the fish are biting, I definitely tie on bigger things to try and attract bigger fish to catch. Cool little perch pattern. Tie a couple up, nice and heavy. Junior's Fishing Company. Like and subscribe. Drop some comments below. We'll see you on the next one.